Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session, New Business Dynamics and Cybersecurity SaaS Strategies for Telcos. My name is Andy, and I'm the CEO of Nexusguard. What I'm going to try and do in this session is to summarize the insights that we have gotten, having spoken to hundreds of telcos, ISPs, data centers, over the past couple of years. Let's first talk about COVID and how it has changed our world. I think it's safe to say that all of us have been aware that multi-year mega trends such as shopping online, Uberization, remote working, and the globalization of talent, and lastly, cloud computing. These are trends that are eventually going to reshape our business as we know it. But I would bet that we all had a different time scale before COVID as to when this would be impacting our business. I think the biggest change now is COVID has now significantly brought forward that timeline. My parents have learned how to use technology. A lot of our assumptions have been due in part to newer generations having to come of age before the technology would be able to mature. So time is of essence. But what COVID has done is to force our parents' generation in a way that has never been seen before, to learn to use, and most importantly, to actually get comfortable with a whole bunch of things that they were willing to do before COVID, like the more active usage of social media, with buying online. My parents, for example, over the last 2 years, they have now gotten comfortable with ordering online and having it delivered to their doorstep. In fact, they are pleased to use Amazon to buy rice, for example, a 10 kg packet of rice. Instead of them lugging the whole rice home, what they do now is they place an order online and it gets delivered right to their doorstep. Don't get me wrong, they're not entirely changed. They still love to go to the supermarket and walk around, but they now have changed their behavior. They only pick up things that are not very heavy. So anything that is heavy, they would actually just place an order and buy it online. Now, close to 10% of the global world population are over the age of 65. We may actually have to start thinking about a whole range of requirements this market segment may have. Maybe it's about making our pages with bigger buttons and font sizes. Maybe it's simpler navigation. But maybe there's an entire new category of products that we have not thought of that could be launched to serve them. Now, what we have seen during COVID times is also the rapid adoption by a lot of business owners who are now beginning to sell online, beginning to get comfortable, changing their processes to be selling their products and services online. A lot of them during the COVID times, they have no choice in order to survive with the whole country on lockdown. They actually have to migrate and find a way to sell online. It could be setting up a simple page to offer their services to their customers. It could be joining a platform aggregator and delivering their services online. What this trend has brought us is there are now millions of new SMB soft targets. This is actually, this influx of SMB businesses joining the bandwagon and selling online is actually a new opportunity for delivering SaaS services. A lot of these businesses, they are not tech savvy. They would be what we call soft targets. When it comes to niche groups, they can actually attack them and they wouldn't have a lot of defense. It will be easier to bring them down. And Imagine if you are one or two of small business owners in a niche business in a city. And this business that you own is a seasonal niche business that have now migrated online during the COVID years. You were to fast forward post-COVID times, say you're selling Christmas log cakes or you're selling moon cakes. I would imagine the majority of your seasonal orders happen within a short frame of time, a couple of months. And what would happen to your business if a DDoS attack were to bring down your online ticketing system? It would be devastating for the business. So this new SMB group is now part of the target groups, in our opinion, other than the ones that we are already familiar with, the large multinationals. Every time they get an attack, you'll see the media reporting it. There will be a lot of noise about it. But increasingly, before COVID, we already saw mid-sized enterprises were increasingly digitizing their business. They have already become a target group. Now adding the millions of SMBs to that group and the traditional political activism type of attacks. And in the future, we are expecting to see attacks on blockchain networks as well. When it comes to the DDoS trends, we do not think that COVID has actually changed the trajectory of what we have been seeing for a number of years. We have seen steadily an increase in the number of DDoS attacks, larger surface areas. But what COVID has maybe changed is we saw an acceleration of that trend, a slight acceleration of that trend. But what's most concerning, I think, during this COVID period is the increase of multi-vector attacks. And I think multi-vector attacks will be the most concerning when it comes to telcos and service providers. Let me elaborate what we mean by this. To talk about this, we have to maybe have a basic understanding of the impact of multi-vector attacks. For our enterprise customers, we have their main surface area would be their applications or their networks. These customers, they only care about the end result. For them, their attack surface exposed to the internet will include their application services, their network resources spread across OSI layers 3 to 7, including their DNS layer. Attackers would look for the easiest path to bring about disruption to these businesses. They would not be typically brute forcing their way through, but rather attackers would probe to try and discover where in these layers does the enterprises not have any defense, or at the minimum where their defense is the weakest. These attackers will now send multi-vector attacks to simultaneously target a number of attack services to cause confusion. When it comes to multi-vector DDoS attacks, it can start with a volumetric UDP attack, increasing the size dramatically in a matter of minutes before ebbing away and starting an entirely new attack surface. Say the increased packet rates now delivered to the target. The mix of these techniques makes it very difficult for enterprise to track down the source of the attacks, to decide on what defense to put up, and coordinate between the vendors that they use across the different surfaces. The other problem for these enterprises is that their security teams often do not see enough attacks to be extremely experienced and be able to very quickly mount an effective defense. This would also be true for most telcos that offer partial defense systems, like say a clean pipe service, because they typically, telcos traditionally, they would use legacy systems that do not offer a unified defense that span across the entire OSI layer. The telcos operational teams or their network teams, the struggle is not a problem of their skill set, but typically more of a problem with the tools at their disposal. Now, the DDoS attacks, from a telco's perspective, they sell a dumb pipe. When enterprise get attacked, there is a question of who should be responsible. Would it be the telco, or would it be the enterprise that should be responsible for defending against the attack? So DDoS from a telco's perspective, it is an inconvenient issue. It impacts SLAs for all customers across the board. If the attack is large enough to impact the network, creates a lot of tickets to their support team, but if that single account is important enough, then they would have no choice but to try and find a way to deal with it. Even if that attack is not large enough to impact their network, they would have to find a way to deal with it. And that's how typically telcos get their start in offering DDoS services. But what we have seen over the last couple of years is that increasingly tenders for connectivity from the larger enterprise accounts or from governments, they specify some sort of DDoS protection in their RFPs. That's one reason why increasingly we find telcos having to commercialize or productize their DDoS protection. And in fact, we are seeing that whether a telco has DDoS protection, it has become the differentiation. At the DDoS layer, if you have that as a differentiation, it will be key to continue to win more business. What telcos will do is then they will invest in hardware to protect their networks. And like I was explaining earlier, they would then look at offering it as a SaaS service to their customers, partially to pass on the cost, the huge expense of buying those hardware. And definitely offering this DDoS service as an additional SaaS service would also provide relief in terms of margin pressures. Right? So this is what would happen. A telco would purchase hardware. Here we see box B and box D. And this would be at the layer 3, primarily because majority of the volumetric attacks will come through the layer 3. Generally, these defense mechanisms are effective in blocking the majority of the attacks. Although in the last 2 years, we are seeing a new type of layer 3 attack that would still slip through the boxes. And for some of the telcos, as they get more familiar with offering DDoS as a SaaS service, they start to add boxes. Here we see box A and box C at the layer 7. And the implementation could be different. Some of the telcos actually implement it within their own network. Some of them, they get end users, they sell end users the boxes and have it implemented within the end users network. Regardless of how it's being done today, in general, the layer 7 defense is not as effective. There are a few reasons for this: the granularity of the attacks, the complexity of the layer 7 defense. And you generally need to be a very good user, a very expert user of the box in order to use them effectively. Not that the boxes are no good, but you have to be an expert user to use it effectively. And majority with the lack of talent, we have very tight talent at the moment. So with a lot of enterprises finding it hard to actually hire the right people, this becomes generally the issue that they face. Right. So what happens is, what we tend to see is, if we look at this picture here, at the large enterprise segment, we saw the layer 3, layer 7 boxes earlier, but due to the box and manpower limitations, most CSPs will tend to serve the larger accounts here. You have to take a proactive approach. the service is not fully productized, that it's high touch. But we feel that, like I have pointed out earlier, the dynamics of businesses changing now would mean that we would have to start thinking about how we service the mid-market and the SMB customers. But if we were to use the current traditional solutions, the problem is it will be very hard to scale that up to serve tens of thousands of customers. A new solution is needed in order to be able to scale and support without costing a bomb. I think a lot of telcos, what they do is when they buy boxes, they have an upstream cloud offload service from a larger telco upstream. So if the attack comes that is larger than the size of their network, they could offload the attack to the larger telco's network. But when you try and offer this as a service, there exists certain friction because you cannot propagate your single account customers' information into the larger telco's network. This causes friction, but not every telco can actually afford to build a global DDoS scrubbing network by themselves. In addition, when you have a large number of boxes, all these different products would have to be integrated in order to provide a frictionless service. But the integration of these products is actually a huge challenge facing many of the telcos that we've been talking to. The other portion of it is you need a large, skillful operational team to ensure, because that's the key of the quality of the service, right? When you span across the OSI layers. And the final issue that we see is that a lot of product teams today, they are responsible for an entire range of services. Cybersecurity is just one of the many. So it's extremely challenging for the product team when it comes to productizing anti-DDoS service for what the market and the customers' requirements truly are. We feel that anti-DDoS for service providers has to be redesigned in order to meet the new dynamics. This needs to be a managed service that works for both the product and the network teams within the organization. Remember, for the network team, their main responsibility is to manage, maintain the network stability, ensure availability for all customers. They will want to protect their infrastructure and provide all-round attack protection. For the product team, what they really need is the ability to be flexible, to tweak and repackage services for the different segments of the market, ranging from the small, mid-sized businesses, the corporates, carriers, governments. They will need to make sure that the service that they are offering is able to operate locally within their network, as well as into the cloud when there's a need to fail over to the cloud, be able to map the services to the technology and provide, in certain cases, multi-tenanted services to their customers. We looked at all these problems and we decided that it actually can be done. Our focus in Nexusguard, we looked at all these issues that we talked about, and our focus is actually to simplify the provision of SaaS across the entire breadth of anti-DDoS services that the telco's customers might ever need. We seek to balance the business requirements as well as the technological needs from the customers and the network team. So what we have done is for the sophisticated customers where they may have boxes on-prem within their own network, we have developed a portal for them where they can, it almost behaves like they having an on-prem box within their own network, but now it is actually sitting within the telco's network. We have federated portals. We make sure we included all the bells and whistles that they would need. For the mid-market, our focus is on being able to scale and assist the telco's team with the onboarding, service delivery, the support, the reporting dashboard, and delivery as a complete service. And finally, for the SMB segment, our focus is to make sure that the system will be able to massively scale and allow the SMBs to purchase the service at an affordable price and be able to sell service with a simple dashboard tools and reports that they can use on their own. I think the final key piece of this we felt was important is the traditional model to purchase a DDoS system is to pay a large upfront capex, sometimes in the millions of dollars. But in our model, we felt that we need to take away the risk for a telco, and we came up with a OpEx or a subscription model where the on-premise hardware is actually taken care by us, the licensing is included, and the investment will be aligned with the growth of the business. With that, that brings me to the end of this session. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.